Before you sleep tonight, take a moment to get comfortable. Breathe deeply. Let your thoughts soften. You are about to hear the secret history of royal children with Down syndrome, a story not of crowns and triumphs, but of shadows and silence. A story of little princes and princesses born with Down syndrome into power, only to be hidden away, their laughter hushed, their names erased, their lives lived behind locked doors. This is not the history written in gilded books or painted on palace ceilings. It is the history whispered in forgotten diaries, in secret letters, and in the quiet love of those who cared for children the world refused to see. So tonight, close your eyes and follow me into the palaces of Europe, where behind stone walls and velvet curtains, the most vulnerable members of royal bloodlines were silenced, and where centuries later, we choose to remember them. Power, when inherited, demands purity. For centuries, European monarchies built their legitimacy on an illusion, the illusion of perfect blood, blessed by God, superior to that of the rest of the world. Each prince was not just a child, he was a bargaining chip, a guarantee of stability, a living symbol that divine order remained intact. And in a world where appearances mattered more than essence, difference became a threat. The birth of a child with Down syndrome, even if it did not yet bear that name, was seen as a curse, an error that shattered the myth of sacred bloodlines. Their very existence questioned everything: supposed genetic perfection, divine blessing, the very idea of royalty. There was no room for tenderness, for slowness, for love without conditions. Because royalty did not raise children, it raised heirs. While a peasant might accept, with resignation and sometimes genuine love, a different child, royal families faced a harsher choice: to accept difference and risk weakening their image, or to deny it, to hide it, to erase it. And almost always they chose silence. Children who did not fit the mold of courtly protocol were set aside, sent to convents, hidden away in country estates, locked in empty wings of palaces, sometimes declared dead at birth, other times simply never named. They did not exist. Down syndrome would not be described scientifically until the 19th century, but its traits were obvious to all: almond-shaped eyes, a flat face, slow speech, immense affection. In the mentality of the time, all of this was seen not as diversity, but as defect. The quiet beauty of these children, their unique way of inhabiting the world, had no value in courts where every gesture was calculated, every word measured, every smile rehearsed for politics. The problem was not their existence, it was that they did not fit. They could not dance at banquets, remember diplomats' names, or read speeches with a firm voice. And that, for the crowns, was unacceptable. Thus began a pattern that would repeat for generations. The child is born, the family notices their difference, and the mechanism of concealment activates. Doctors execute it, nurses enforce it, kings and queens approve it, often with tears they do not allow themselves to show. Sometimes there was real sorrow, sometimes only shame, but always there was fear. Fear of what foreign courts would think, fear of losing power, fear that the fragility of a child might reveal the fragility of the throne. And fear creates silence, a silence that became tradition, passed down like a ritual of coronation. Letters were burned, photographs destroyed, names erased from the books. And so an official history was built, without flaws, without stains, without children who could not reign. What these families did not understand, or could not afford to understand, was that humanity does not reside in perfection, but in love. That a child is not a chess piece in political games, but a complete being with the right to exist even if they could never sign treaties or command armies. That lesson would take centuries to arrive. In the meantime, royal children born with Down syndrome were trapped between blue blood that did not want to see them and an official history that erased them before it ever wrote their names.
Across Europe's broken archives lie stories that whisper. Among scratched-out letters, destroyed portraits, and hidden diaries, fragments survive of lives that should never have been erased. They were royal boys and girls, born with crowns drawn into their cradles, their destinies written but never fulfilled, born in palaces but condemned to live as shadows. One of them was Prince John, youngest son of King George V of the United Kingdom. In his first years, he was photographed with his siblings, dressed in sailor suits, smiling shyly. But when seizures began and learning difficulties became visible, his presence faded. He was sent away to Sandringham, where he lived with his nurse, Lala Bill. His family rarely visited. At age 13, he died after a severe seizure. His mother wrote that his death was a release for him, for all. In France, the Palace of Fontainebleau kept another secret. In 1640, a child with unusual features was born to Louis XIII and Anne of Austria. Official chronicles speak of a weak infant who died after a few weeks, but letters found centuries later in Vatican archives describe a baby with traits we now associate with Down syndrome. He lived 43 days. His wet nurse was interrogated repeatedly, as if his difference could be blamed on her milk. His only sin was to be born different, within a crown that did not forgive errors. Russia had its invisible daughter. In 1882, the youngest daughter of Grand Duke Vladimir Alexandrovich was born. She does not appear in genealogies, only mentioned as an infant daughter died young. Yet palace records show servants assigned to her care for 16 years. Letters describe a girl who never spoke clearly, who still played with dolls at 14, who once wandered into the snowy gardens laughing, unaware her country stood on the edge of revolution. Spain's Habsburgs, obsessed with blood purity, suffered the cost of their own inbreeding. Charles II, the Bewitched, is the most famous, but he was not alone. Medical notes from the 17th century describe the birth of a princess with Mongolic features. She was never named, never titled. A court physician, Diego Mateo Zapata, wrote compassionately of her joy in music, though she could not speak. For this, he was accused of heresy and burned by the Inquisition. His notes, hidden inside hollowed books, were not rediscovered until 1954. The Ottomans, too, held secrets. Sultan Mehmed III's son was declared dead in records, but in truth was sent to the kafes, a golden cage where unwanted princes were imprisoned. For more than 20 years, food was delivered to his locked chamber. When the door was finally opened, they found a grown man with the mind of a child, surrounded by mosaics of colored glass he had arranged in solitude. In Bavaria, Princess Alexandra, born in 1826, was hidden in Nymphenburg Palace. Officially, she died at age 3, but diaries reveal she lived until 25, learning to dress herself, to feed canaries, to use a spoon. She never spoke, but she listened. She responded with kindness. She was buried in secret, nameless, without a grave marker. In Portugal, the portrait of Infanta Maria Francisca was never finished. The artist fled, unable, he said, to paint innocence that did not fit power. The girl was sent to a convent where she lived until age 11. The nuns described her joy in folding cloths and humming to prayers without words. Her grave bears only God's child. In Denmark, Prince Gustav was never hidden in one place. His family claimed he traveled constantly for health, but it was only to hide his difference. One tutor wrote that Gustav had perfect memory, could predict weather changes, and sensed lies. Who truly has the disability? The tutor asked. Him or us who cannot understand his world? Each story reveals the same pattern: silence, concealment, shame. And yet, in the midst of abandonment, small gestures of love remain. Nurses who saved drawings, nuns who sang lullabies, tutors who risked reputation to defend dignity. These children were not mistakes, they were human, real. And though their names were erased, the echo of their existence still lingers in Europe's stone walls. Not all the stories of these royal children end in absolute shadow. Sometimes, within the silence imposed by power, someone whispered. A nurse who saved a drawing. A nun who sang the same song every night because she knew a little girl was waiting for it. A gardener who watered more slowly because a boy was imitating him, happy without knowing why. These small acts were forms of resistance. Resistance against a system that ordered them to ignore, forget, erase. At Sandringham, while the British royal family fulfilled their diplomatic duties, Lala Bill spent hours with Prince John. She taught him to recognize birds by their songs, to read simple phrases, to find peace in repetition. She saved his drawings, his toys, his favorite objects. When he died, she wrapped them carefully, as if they were relics. In Russia, letters from a lady-in-waiting speak of a girl who loved lace. She could not speak, but she laughed while touching fabric. They made dolls for her from scraps of imperial dresses. When the revolution destroyed everything, that lady hid a box at the base of a statue. Decades later, it was found. Inside were ribbons, buttons, a blurred photograph, and a note that read, "She was loved, even if we were not allowed to say it." In Portugal, a sister at the convent taught little Francisca to distinguish colors through flowers. Each day, they collected petals together, not to study, but to play. At the end of her life, that nun wrote that she had never seen a child so happy over a single red rose. In Sweden, a tutor of Prince Gustav, the nomadic prince, dared to write that his pupil was not incapable, only different, that his way of seeing the world was more honest, that he cried when someone lied, that he grew excited at the shifting sky. The tutor was removed, but he left behind a hidden box of letters describing Gustav's unique gifts. And in Prussia, nurse Emma Müller spent her own savings to commission portraits of Waldemar, the prince who was never shown in public, one each year showing him grow with dignity and tenderness. When she tried to give them to the royal family, they were burned before her eyes. But Emma had kept copies. She hid them, along with letters to newspapers describing Waldemar as a boy who loved trains, who could identify birds by their songs, who could replay a symphony after hearing it once.
These gestures did not change the system, but all of them whispered, "You matter. You deserve to be seen, to be cared for, to be loved." They were echoes of humanity in places ruled by silence. They did not defy the throne, but they defied forgetting. They did not proclaim speeches, but they protected memories. And there is power in that. Because when the world insists someone should not exist,
The simple act of holding their hand, of whispering their name, of saving their laughter, becomes resistance. We may never know how many royal children were completely erased. But thanks to these quiet rebels, nurses, tutors, nuns, servants, we have fragments, footprints, whispers that outlived the power that tried to silence them. Because when history is silent, love finds a way to speak. History does not only erase names, it erases what might have been. Every hidden royal child was a life interrupted, not by death, but by silence. They grew without open embraces, without a parent's caress, without the basic right to be acknowledged. What was lost were not crowns or inheritance. It was the possibility of a full childhood. Imagine what it meant to be a child in a palace surrounded by luxuries that never belonged to you. Watching siblings learn languages, music, diplomacy, while you were shut away because you would never be deemed fit to be seen. The pain was not only theirs, it was also their parents'. Parents forced to turn love into shame, to look at their child and feel fear when they should have felt pride. The price of silence was double. Children grew believing their difference was a punishment. Families grew believing that hiding was safer than loving. The official histories speak of strong dynasties, pure blood, divine legitimacy. But behind that facade lies emptiness. Siblings who never played together. Mothers who wept in secret. Fathers who signed decrees to hide the very children they should have protected. What was lost were not heirs. What was lost were people. Children who might have become artists, musicians, storytellers. Children who were never allowed to show themselves as they were. Generous, spontaneous, full of tenderness that courts mistook for weakness. We lost the chance to know how they might have transformed history with their unique way of seeing the world. Perhaps they would have reminded kings that true greatness lies not in crowns, but in caring for the most vulnerable. The loss is also ours, because every erased life robs us of a lesson in humanity. It leaves us with an incomplete mirror, a fragmented story. The history we were told was one of perfection, but the real one was always full of cracks, of hidden tears, of songs no one wanted to hear. Behind every hidden child was a universe that was never allowed to bloom. And within that emptiness lies the true tragedy. Not that they were born different, but that they were never given the chance to be fully human in the eyes of others. That is what was lost forever. History tried to silence them, but each time we speak their story, we return to them what was denied, the right to exist in memory. It doesn't matter that archives erased them, that portraits were burned, that names were scratched from the records. What is essential survives in whispers, in hidden diaries, in letters never sent, in the memories of those who dared to love them. To remember them today is not just history, it is justice, because they had no voice, but we can speak for them. because they were seen as mistakes. But in truth, they were reminders of what it means to be human. Each hidden child leaves us with a question. What do we do with difference? Do we hide it in fear, as kings and queens once did? Or do we embrace it as part of life's richness? By remembering them, we resist the idea that only perfection deserves a place. We resist the silence that tried to bury them. We resist the temptation to repeat the same patterns of exclusion in our own time. Imagine little Ferdinand in his Viennese tower. Picture Prince John playing alone in Sandringham. Remember the Portuguese Infanta folding altar cloths, or the Ottoman prince creating mosaics of glass in his golden cage. Each of them was more than a rumor, more than a shameful secret. They were whole people, with laughter, with fears, with moments of joy. And by recalling them, we restore the dignity they were denied.
They teach us that fragility is not shame, that difference is not error, that what weakens a society is not the existence of those born different, but the cruelty of those who refuse to love them. The true strength of a kingdom, of a family, of a civilization is not measured in perfect lineages or supposedly pure blood. It is measured in the capacity to care, to recognize, to make space for those who do not meet expectations. By remembering these children, we do more than honor their lives. We remind ourselves that history must not repeat itself, that no one must ever again be hidden for being different, that memory is resistance. Because as long as someone remembers them, they are not entirely lost. Their invisible laughter still lingers in palace halls, in forgotten convents, in gardens where they once played. And now, they live here too, with you, with me, with everyone listening to their story. So tonight, before you close your eyes, hold a thought for them, for the hidden children of royalty, and for all those who were ever silenced. And if this story moved you, I invite you to support this channel with a like, to share it, and to subscribe so we may continue rescuing together the echoes of a past that still has much to teach us. Because to remember is to resist, and to resist is the most human way to honor what was lost.